And Fairlawn, we're being recorded. Got it. Okay. We are and Fairlawn is, as April rolls into May, as Winian points out, I think we're on a roll from Easter Sunday's burst of spirit, the International Day of Pink gathering that was pretty remarkable. The special music last Sunday, the book sale, the energy is flowing and it feels new. And that's kind of encouraging in this beyond pandemic world as we take stock and refocus and take into account everything that we've learned. So that has been really a buoying up kind of experience. Today, we're going to talk a bit about governance and leadership. And we have, in that regard, two key vacancies on governing council that are anticipated to be open and hopefully filled for the upcoming annual general meeting, which is being held is being planned to be held on May 28th. And all the information about that is being assembled and will soon be sent out to you. To stay in compliance with the United Church of Canada's requirements, bottom line, we have about 2 weeks during which to fill these two particularly crucial vacancies. Today's discussion is to give you all, as members of the Fairlawn congregation and community, an update on recent events. It's an opportunity to engage your input for recruiting for these critical governing council roles as well. But thanks to a strong leadership group of Fairlawn Forward Governing Council, the support that we've had from Toronto United Church Council, Ron Ewart and Jill Strapp, and the strong input of you, the members of this congregation, we are a community of people of spirit and purpose, and we have developed a missional plan. Thanks to all of you, the progress we've made to date, which I don't like to compare, but in comparison with many of the other faith communities I'm hearing about, our progress to date is pretty remarkable, and that is your doing, all of you working together. Thanks to you, we know who we are, we know why we're here, and we know where we feel we're called to invest our energy and vision for such a time as this. Thanks to you, we also have the resources available to put behind that plan to make it happen. Those resources include our building, the results of our careful financial stewardship, and most of all, those resources include our people. And that's, again, you. We have a short presentation to fill in a few of the things I've touched on, and then we'll open up this time to your questions and comments. And the presentation begins with Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. I think we can certainly acknowledge and honor that it feels really good to be back together again in community and in a variety of meaningful ways that really help us grow personally and spiritually and to support one another. And it feels to many of us like we've really got our groove back, and that's even beyond Sunday services. Just a few things that we've had success with our Teze services. We've been creative in the use of our sanctuary, and we've woven in some poetry and sound and things that explore the senses, decoration into the services. And we've clearly delighted in the return of our choristers and musicians, which has just been so magnificent. We've come together for the amazing Wintering into Spring small group ministry series. And through the community building activities, we've welcomed some new faces into our church. And these are activities like the book sale, the community service of healing and hope, the special affirms event that was on April 16th, our social justice activities, the wonderful spreading of our soil for the new garden, and of course, our Christmas and Easter celebrations. And we want to continue to welcome new faces and hear new voices. So it's very important at this stage we don't lose the momentum in these activities that are really so important to us. And over to Vicki.
As a governing council, we have now been turning our minds to the months ahead and considering what resources we need to care for this church and wonderful community of faith, and to put our plans into action. As we reviewed what we have in place, we distinguished between the next few months and the time beyond 2023. In the next several months, we remain in a state now of excited anticipation. We have two strong committees of the congregation doing work that has a defined timeline. First, as you know, we have a strong search committee active in finding a new ministerial leader. Second, we have a negotiation team populated by excellent, skilled individuals who are ready to work with potential community partners or tenants. We recently we are in the process of signing the listing agreement with a realtor to search for potential tenants. We also continue to search for a community partner for the space we have. We are indeed fortunate, as these are both significant pieces of work that are being completed by ad hoc committees. Both Doug and Steve are here and can answer questions later in the session together. As we look beyond the immediate few months, we know that we will find a minister and help that person to know us and for us to know that individual. Those most closely involved in the governing council over the last few years can then help to support a new leadership team as they create their own renewed form of collaborative working partnership with both a new minister and our experienced staff. We will evolve into a different way in which the property will be used and managed as our church uses become clear. We have a small and very competent staff team that can grow into our missional plans as they emerge. For the existing governing council and trustees, we have been together since 2020 and have shepherded this community of faith through unknown and unknowable COVID waters. At this time, we are thinking about what skills, passions, and resources governing council will need to grow into our missional plans. Well, the majority of our existing governing council team are continuing to serve and will have their names stand at the AGM. The AGM slate is currently open for the required roles of Chair of Governing Council and Chair of the Human Resources and Relationships Committee. The important but not a required role of Explorer Spirituality is also open. And now, Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Vicki. Just a small correction for those of you online. Right. No, sorry. Doug Crozier could not be here today, so he won't be here to answer any questions. But certainly Steve is here to talk about the negotiation team. Sorry about that distraction. Someone was calling me. So as Vicki said, there are three of us who are not continuing on governing council, namely Catherine DL as chair of HRR, Amanda Hancox as chair of Explorer Spirituality, and me as chair of the governing council. So while stepping aside, we will support to the extent desired an orderly transition to a new minister alongside the ongoing work of both the search and the negotiation teams over the coming months. And I would like to also mention that Amanda Hancox will continue in the Governing Council as a member at large, along with Alan Hux. And the members at large currently have two primary roles, which include leading Governing Council projects and being the ongoing eyes and ears on the life and ministry and wishes of the congregation at large. They are also a key liaison with the core governing body who will enable this work. So now I'd like to turn over to Amanda. Thanks, Amanda. Sorry.
We have strong, dedicated professionals remaining on both Governing Council and Explore Spirituality Council. These can steward our assets and resources, like our financial and property, and ensure worship and faithful exploration continue in a beautiful and meaningful way. We have the newly, I don't know how to say this, I don't want to say reformed Music Committee under the very capable leadership of Kathy Salisbury, who will work with Eleanor on matters related to music for worship and other music-related events. The Experience Belonging Purpose Council would continue to have no chair. However, the activities or lay ministry teams, which have historically been captured under the EB banner, like the Prayer Shawl Ministry, TLC, Pastoral Visitation, they'll continue as volunteer interest and management comes forward. The Embrace Action Purpose Council, currently co-chaired by John Ryerson and Sandy Giles Byrne, will continue to be a self-managed and congregation-funded council. In the last several years, the HR&R Committee, formerly M&P, has rebuilt and introduced some key processes to provide structure. The HR&R Committee includes Barb Steep and Alan Hooks, and both are experienced in the activities of the committee and are continuing as members. So over to Steve.
So what is next? First, we will no longer have either a chair of HRR or a chair of Governing Council. We will not be in compliance with the manual of the United Church of Canada in terms of how we are governing our church assets. If that were to remain true, we would not be permitted to call a minister. Secondly, we know that we want to simplify our governance in order to learn from some necessary streamlining that we put into place during COVID pandemic restrictions. We also want to assure new leaders stepping forward that they will have every opportunity to contribute to Fairlawn's mission in ways that have impact and are not absorbed by unnecessarily complex decision-making steps and hoops. Work on this is ongoing and will be formalized eventually. It has been greatly informed by what we have learned over the past few years. And back over to Douglas.
So you've heard a lot of information, and we will momentarily take questions and have some discussion. But to close on a bit of a different note, I invite you to cast your mind back to one of the enduring images from early in the pandemic, when there was a flurry of interest in making sourdough bread. Even among those who were already existing bakers and those who regularly used electric bread makers, sourdough gained a new following. As you know, sourdough bread's distinctiveness is in using a starter rather than commercial yeast. The starter is simply flour and water and naturally occurring airborne microorganisms and wild yeast. A portion, just a small portion of this starter, once it begins to ferment, mixed with the other ingredients for bread, leavens the dough and gives it a distinctive local flavor that you get from the wild yeast that occurs in your area. During COVID, alongside all the other adjustments, adaptations, and disruptions that we had to contend with, Your governing council leadership created a yeasty batch of sourdough culture. Starter, in other words, ready to bake bread for years to come as that starter is fed and nurtured between batches. Some of you may still have some in your fridge. It just continues on once it gets started. And we are now seeking bakers, in essence. We're seeking bakers to knead the dough, to let it rise, to form loaves and to bake this wonderful fragrant bread that we can share widely. Fairlawn has a calling, and we have a plan and the resources to make it all happen. So now is the time for some different leadership skills to take that forward, to bake the bread, because people in our world are hungry. We encourage those new leaders to review the job descriptions that have been prepared and updated for the chairs of Governing Council, the chair of Human Resources and Relationships, and the chair of Explore Spirituality. And we encourage you to call the existing chairs to discuss anything that's unclear or to get a sense of how this works. And we ask you to step forward to support this church into Fairlawn's future.
Thanks, Douglas. So that is a lot of information, and this really concludes our remarks in the presentation. And we'd now like to open it up for your questions and for discussion. This meeting, we time this meeting so as to engage you now to find a solution so that we have the required slate for our AGM, which is on May 28th, and we stay in compliance with the United Church requirements. We would obviously need to know if anyone is stepping forward by mid-month so that that information can go to the congregation in advance of the AGM. And we'd really like to hear from you. And as Douglas said, answer your questions or concerns. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. And I think, Douglas, you're going to be our MC, if you will. Yeah.
You can wave your hands or do the raised hand under the reactions, which moves you to the front screen, and I'll see you right away. Jenny.
What's the nomination process? I assume not a usual formal one or anything, but can we put forth names, people we think, without having really any idea whether they're interested, or we have to approach them first? Or can we just give you the executive council their names and let you sort it out? Approach them.
Either way is possible. It's preferable if you've had a bit of a conversation with them so they have some idea of why they came to mind and what you saw in their skills, their abilities, their experience that made you think of that name. But if you're shy, I can't imagine that, Jenny.
Yeah, well, no.
If you're shy,
you don't know somebody really well, but
that's true. Then you could pass the
was,
name along, yeah, and we can approach them.
Yeah, because I think they would have their sort of immediate questions and concern answered by whoever they're speaking to on executive council, and it might be that amongst the members of executive council, there are folks that know a particular person and would be the right one to approach them. Or anyway, I would like to suggest a couple of names, but I would like to hand it over to the executive council to follow up.
Fair enough. I think Mary Ellen would, well, Mary Ellen's about to be away. So if you want to send those to John Ryerson as Secretary of Governing Council or myself, we will make sure they get passed on.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? And if I don't see you waving your hand, say something. Vicki.
Catherine sends her regrets. She's in Montreal today.
Catherine Dale.
Catherine Dale. I wanted to comment because the position of chair of HR&R, they're both that and the chair of council, as Mary Ellen has explained, are really required. Some people might be, how would I put this, nervous about the HR&R position. And I think that is something that our regional body is now becoming much more aware of. And I wanted to add that, in fact, because so many United Churches have their annual AGMs sort of on a given cycle, that they will be doing a training session for new incoming HR&R members. It will probably be near the, it'll be time near the end of May, so it would work. And they've also become much more understanding and have set up what I would call almost like a rapid response technique, whereby if a chair is worried about something, there are point people that you can approach for questions. And from time to time, I mean, Steve can speak to the meetings that are given to support treasurers, which has gone on for many years, and that's been very helpful for treasurers. They are now starting the same process for chairs of HR&R, that maybe it'll be quarterly or whatever, and you can take part in a Zoom meeting and you can discuss concerns and issues that you see. So these are things that are within our church structure. They have recognized that they need to provide and are now providing, I would say, much more support than 4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah. Other comments or questions? Thank you, Vicki. Kathy has put, can you tell me where on the website the 3 job descriptions reside? Joanne? Do we have the job descriptions on the website?
I have not added any new job descriptions on the website as of yet.
Okay. We
When
will.
yeah, sorry, go on,
Go ahead.
Douglas.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said that the job descriptions were on the website and I just went and looked and I couldn't find them. That's why I put that comment.
Sure, they will be on the website. I guess that was a misstatement, but yes, they will be put on the website, likely under governance, I would think, Joanne.
Yes.
So, yeah. Thanks for that question, Kathy. That's a good question.
Rosemary Cluis. You're on mute, Rosemary.
Okay, I simply don't know what R and HR mean. Could somebody explain?
Human resources and relationships, because people didn't really know what M&P really did. It was kind of like human resources, ministry and personnel. But human resources and relationships means we're dealing with the staff team, but also with healthy relationships between the staff and the congregation members, among congregation members, and more broadly. So they are looking at staffing and collaborative, healthy working relationships of all kinds.
Thank you.
So we changed the name.
Thank you.
Other comment, John.
I just want to make my own observation that you're not on this call because we're looking at you necessarily. We are looking for people, right? And I think there's so many, all of this infrastructure that's been referred to in the preamble there of, everything from building repairs and roof to vision, and now we're on the cusp of hiring a new minister. So much is sort of water under the bridge, and that we've accomplished all of this stuff. And I think there's an opportunity to lighten the load of what's expected of these leadership positions from where we've been. And we had to get through COVID. It was an enormous amount of effort put on. And getting the search committee up, all of these things have taken an enormous load, and that's done. So it's we've already shifted governing council to 4 times a year, unless we need a planning meeting or something special comes up, and we're trying to create an operational committees so that the day-to-day stuff can get knocked off without having to have a full meeting. So the expectations, I think, from the past of what we've been through on chairs has been enormously heavy. And I don't think, and part of the goal here is to change that and give you opportunities to take Fairlawn on this new journey with all of these solid foundation that's been laid for you, but you can now take a vision. And so there's an opportunity for new people to come in and just say, I've always wanted to, and give it a shot. That's how I see it.
That's why you'd be a good person to speak to anybody who's sort of offered up. That's absolutely critical. That's true, and that their council's committed to it. I'm just wondering, you say we have what the deadline that if we don't have human resources or the chair in place. 2 questions. One, we seem to do a very good job in having whoever it was agree to our extension of Douglas's term. Is there a way without, would it be possible, because of what we've all been through, not to extend the current chair or the current human resources chair? But is there another way to either somebody to agree to a temporary position maybe, or there are different governance models, but I understand that we need those 2 chairs. And yes, there was a lot of information given, but clearly what is looming is the necessity of having those 2 chairs in place. So I'm just wondering if there any kind of wiggle room in there somehow.
I think there might be, but any minister coming into a situation where there is that kind of gap in lay leadership is going to have their own uncertainties and questions.
Yeah.
Quite apart from whether or not we are in accord with the manual of the United Church.
Right.
People may be drawn to Fairlawn and excited by the possibilities, but those gaps speak large if they remain. So I think it has its own integrity in terms of finding where that leadership is, because I'm sure it's there. And John's right. We're not pinpointing anybody on this call, but group discernment of people who I have spoken to, former chairs of governing council or whatever it has been called in the past, who inevitably say, I had no idea what I was doing, and then I got into it, I figured it out, and it was really a wonderful experience working with the team and feeling like I was making a really key contribution, and I remember that with real gratitude. Nobody that I've spoken to has said, oh, I knew exactly what I was doing and I thought, this is for me. it was a kind of a growing experience and a willingness to collaborate with the rest of those around the table, and it proved to be a wonderful experience. So we're interested in people, including people who maybe haven't been around for a long time and have some different ideas and experience. Amanda.
Yeah, just to add to that, Douglas, I mean, here I am stepping down as chair of Explore Spirituality, but wanting to stay on governing council because it really is very rewarding work and a really great team. So I absolutely would second that.
Yeah, Derek.
Perhaps John could speak to this one, but one other resource that I think is available is the members of the North Toronto cluster churches, I imagine, has a resource that you can. Is there any comment that you can add to that, John?
Thank you. I was going to mention that. I forgot. Yes. So we have a cluster of 9 churches, and several of them are in similar situations to us in sort of scale in terms of what they're working on. We all have our different paths, but there's, and I think, I'll put words in your mouth, Mary Ellen, but I think there's been a fair bit of synergy between you and chairs of the other organizations, and that's another resource that we can tap into. And I think any vision going forward for us has to realistically consider how can we find more synergy and more opportunities by working together, whether it's a social justice thing on Roehampton or other more functional issues. But I think there is certainly a lot of, so what you're opening up, Derek, is that within just looking at the people on this call, many of you have had leadership positions in this church in the past, and there is an enormous amount of depth of resource and help to anybody coming into these jobs.
Yeah. Mary Ellen.
Oh, thank you. Yes, there's been a lot of discussion with the chairs around the cluster table, if you will, and a lot of learning and shared learning and problem solving for sure. And I don't see that ending. In fact, I see that continuing to be important. I wanted to actually speak to your comment, Douglas, about chairs and what they experience when they come into the seat, if you will. I was named as chair in February 2020, and 2 weeks later we went into COVID. So yes, and that was after, frankly, a period where the leadership had lagged, frankly, for a variety of very understandable reasons. So it was challenging to come in, and then COVID made it even more challenging. But I want to reiterate the point that's been made several times, and that is we have an experienced team, many of whom are going to stay on governing council, and an amazing negotiation team that is leading the charge on finding a tenant or a community partner to support our mission. And that's not going away. And so I think it's really important to count our blessings on that one, not forget it. And of course, ditto for the trustees. We have a sound group of trustees and an addition that's coming on. So we are very, very well served in our community of faith. So added to that, as was alluded to by, I think, Vicki, we are creating something called an operations committee, which is intended to take care of the operating day-to-day issues that have found their way to the governing council table, particularly over COVID, and relieving that table of those things will free that governing council up even further. I believe. And finally, I would say this is just my sense, but we have worked hard as a congregation to come up with a community of faith profile, and that detailed our journey forward, what we think is our journey forward. Now we need to walk on that path and execute. So we've done a lot of heavy lifting. And so I think it does need a new leadership skill. It needs a leadership skill that can make things happen, that can execute on a plan. That's a different leadership skill. And so as we think about people who might step into these jobs, I would ask you to think about that as well. And it is a journey of passion and a journey of learning and an amazing opportunity to deepen our relationships with one another. That has been my experience. So I wanted to speak to that, Douglas, since you opened the door.
Yeah.
I walk through that door.
Excellent. And speaking from my perspective in ministry, you know, if I was coming into Fairlawn, I would be excited and you know, clearly drawn to make a big change in my life, because I found a compelling sense of vision and community and impact, and wanting to find those people at Fairlawn who want to collaborate and work with me to build a new team to run with this. And you know, from Fairlawn's perspective, you're going to be, you know, in a position to connect with somebody with some fresh skills and vision and energy, and really run with something. And I mean, that's tremendously exciting. And I have every expectation that the search committee is going to bring forward a name of someone who is going to be really worth spending time with and working with and collaborating with in leadership. And that is exciting stuff. We've got a couple more minutes. Other comments or questions? Any bread bakers out there? Still have sourdough in your fridge?
Well, I do want to thank you for bringing this forward the way you have, because it is, you know, a major mountain that we have to climb to get. At this point, we still are, and it's hard because we don't know who's been approached or how many people have been approached, but that's why I'm saying I think I'll send in 2 or 3 names, but you might already have approached them, so I certainly don't want to approach them again.
That would be great. And everyone have conversations with folks, and it's always interesting how the spirit works to stir up names and think of people in a different way, and discover that they've been kind of wondering about doing something different as well, and see where it goes. Vicki?
In light of that, I think that you might note that the AGM is on Pentecost Sunday. And Pentecost Sunday is, of course, the Sunday that marks the Spirit, you know, and you know that my husband loves his Pentecost stole with the flames, and
yes,
it is very fitting that we're thinking about this in this way. So we can look forward to, and I think that Jenny had a really good suggestion. You can talk with people, you can be encouraging, you can, it's the Spirit moves through this community of faith.
Yeah. Eric. Thank you, Vicki.
And in the Spirit moving vein, you know, it's the, you know, we pray for things to happen and then we make them happen. Having served in a governing council in a couple of different roles, the other thing that we haven't mentioned is when I was doing those roles, I was getting a lot of support from members of the congregation who would, you know, bring forward ideas and resolutions to things, help to get particular issues dealt with. It's not like we asked the governing council to be off on an island on their own. So
No.
I think that would be dangerous if we were on an island. We'd get kicked off the island. And certainly the introduction of the members at large was exactly to do that, so that we had a link. But yeah, the information, the doors have been opened, and my experience is that I've had the support of this wonderful community in so many ways that I won't mention them, because then we'd go on quite a long time today. But I agree with you, Derek. I agree with you.
So thank you for your time and for your thoughts and your questions. And John?
Not everybody likes to speak up in forums like this. If there's comments or thoughts about this meeting that you'd like to put into the chat box before we sign off, maybe that would be more than welcome.
It's always available for quiet sharing of thoughts. And I've been invited to bring this to a close with a word of prayer, and to kind of gather up our thoughts, our yearnings, and our hopes and dreams for this remarkable community of people, and as we go on our way. So let's do that. God of community, God of purpose, you connect us and put a spirit in us that yearns for relationship. And you yourself hunger for genuine connection with us, listening and loving us, and living into our questions, our hopes, and even our fears. Thank you for this time of connecting, for this time of community, of listening and learning, for seeding it with inspiring signs of life. May we take the words that we have heard, the words we have spoken, and see where they take us in an awareness of the gifts that you have placed within us and within others around us, gifts that yearn to be used and yearn to be shared. Bless us with hope, bless us with joy, and with peace. We pray in the name of Jesus, who walks with us. Amen. Thank you all.
Mary Ellen, are you going to call?